Hope no one gets mad about it. And yeah, so I was saying that React scripts is necessary to run your React app. It will have scripts to help you run React. And then React DOM is something that will sync up a particular virtual DOM, which we will not dig much into. But React DOM is something that React maintains with our code. And whenever there is a change in that virtual DOM, React DOM helps us see it in the page. So that's why we need all of these three packages in our project. So you can see that after installation, it says a bunch of things that we can do. So all of these things you see, you can run several commands. So these are set up by React scripts. These run React scripts. So if you have Node installed, you will obviously also have npm. So you can do npm run start as said in here to start the development server. We'll go ahead and do that. Oh, sorry. We should be inside the project. Do note that. So our project name was NFT Hyphen Engine. And inside it, now I will run npm run dev. Sorry, what was it? Start. So this started our React's development server. So development server means that is something you will use while developing the application. Uh, the reason this will be different than a normal production build is that whatever changes we make in our code, that is reflected there real time. So that's one of the use cases of a development environment. Okay, so we can see that we have some UI already given to us from React. So this is like a starter UI. We should probably remove this and start building our own UI. I'm going to head towards Storm. So this is the IDE I prefer to use, and feel free to use any IDE you feel. Some good options are VS Code, Atom, and Sublime. Okay. If you're a student, you could also probably get a student license to use WebStorm. Okay, so now I'm going to open the project that we just created, NFT engine. So it's under code, Duolearn, NFT engine. Opening it. Okay. So most projects come up with a README file. So README files are just like a file where you have information about the product or the project. So it again has all of the scripts that we can run, which we already know, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and let's go one file by one file on folder by folder what everything means. Right. So we already just discussed README file. Okay. So then we have package JSON. So package JSON, a package.json maintains all the dependencies. So dependencies are nothing but code that have already been written and published somewhere in the internet that you can directly use. So some of them are like React DOM, and React script, which were added by the Create React app. Okay. So yeah, basically that's what package JSON does. Holds all your dependencies like this and your scripts that you can run. So when you click on start, so we just did npm run start, and this is specifying what it should do. So we're saying it should call React script start. So that's what it does. Okay, then we have package.log JSON. So this is kind of auto generated as well. So it keeps complete track of all the dependencies you're using and the dependencies used by those dependencies in a very tree manner. If you look at it, it's like have dependencies inside dependencies. So it just keeps track of it in a very strict version control way. Then we have git ignore file. So if you have ever used GitHub and Git repositories, you probably know about this file. So this file is like a file that tells you which files to ignore for our Git manager, Git CLI. So which means that you will not be able to add these files to your tracking environment or your tracking repo. And this is usually done because of the these kind of things, right? Such as node modules, which is just all the dependencies that we're using. Their code is installed in here in node modules. So we do not need to keep track of them in our GitHub because those can be easily installed with package.json. Okay. And then we have two more folders, public and SRC. Public folder holds some basic files that are directly exposed from your app. So this index.html is what is directly served when we run our React application. And this uh, will then have a JavaScript embedded in it, which uh, which will be what the React code we actually write, right? And it can also hold other assets and stuff. Okay. Then we have SRC. So this will be the main folder that we will be interacting with or creating files in. And this is where all our most of the code will lie in. Okay. So the entry point file is called index.js. So entry point is the first file that gets executed in our React code, or in most of the projects. There would usually be an entry point file where everything is the project starts running. So such file is the index.js file. So index.js file is doing a handful of things here. So uh, this is an import statement which says that we're importing React from the dependency React, and similarly React DOM. So React DOM is again what connects our code to the DOM. And then we're also importing CSS. You must be familiar with CSS as well. So in React, we can write CSS in separate file like this. And when we import it, this will be applied to our application. Then we're importing app from app. So this notation means that current directory and app. So that would be this app choice. So you can see some of the familiar stuff such as HTML over here. But then again, you notice that this is inside a JavaScript file. So uh, this would like baffle someone who had just started doing React. Like why is there HTML like this inside a JavaScript file? That most people have that question and do feel that it's unnecessary for some reason. Even I felt that. Yeah. So this is the cool thing about React, right? You can write HTML within your JS so that you can have your logic directly in it, right? You can write logic within this thing. So that gives us a great advantage to make the components more reactive. Okay. So similarly, this app.js is having an app.css file imported, which means all of the styles is getting uh, applied to this app.js file. So if you have class name.app, so we have styles for that here that's being applied. Yep. Okay. So I'm just gonna remove all of this for now, and so that we can start fresh. Gonna remove the logo as well. I'm gonna clear the CSS, and let's check how it looks. Okay, we made it completely blank, so that we can start from fresh. Okay. Let me keep my code and stuff in one page, and yeah, cool. So what I'm gonna do is create a folder called components. The components, if you remember in the beginning, I said that in the React, every piece of the UI is like splitted or organized in components and then used together. So which gives us the advantage of reusing it and maintaining it easily. excuse me. Yeah. So let's create a simple component, right? I'm going to call, so in order to create a component, we're going to create a JavaScript file and going to name it, um, let's say, navbar. Okay. So I have navbar here. So how do you start creating a component, right? So we go ahead like this. We say const navbar. We give this arrow function, right? So this will then return something like an HTML. So let's say it returns a div which says this is an arrow bar. Okay. And what we then have to do is export this default navbar. What this means, what this particular line means is that now that you can export this navbar into other files, and in that file we can use this. And what default means is that if you do not specify what you want to import from it, navbar will be imported as the default thing. So let me show you. So I do hope that you are a little bit familiar with JavaScript. So here const is just a keyword that specifies either initialization of a variable or an arrow function like this. Hmm. So this is the syntax of an arrow function. Here you will have the function name, and in this brackets you can give uh, any arguments you want to use, and then this is the function definition that is returning an HTML. Let's just call it HTML for now. And finally, we are making the navbar accessible throughout the project by exporting it. Okay. Now let me use that in app.js. So since app.js is the one that is being rendered in our application. So I'm going to import it. Let's call it import navbar. You have to give the directory to it. So if you see it, it's on the same level of the app.js. So we will go dot forward slash and look for suggestions. It says components. You can see. So in most text editor and IDs, you'll be able to get suggestions like this. And so this is inside components. At components, it's navbar.js, right? Okay. Let's check the browser now. So since we imported it, the way to make it appear is to by calling it inside our app function that is returning this HTML, right? So you have to uh, render an element that is exported. So like this. So this is now this is now a React element which returns with whatever element, whatever function that returns some sort of HTML looking thing, that we consider it as an element. Okay. And the way to render an element on UI is to put it inside like this. So you have to call the render the component like this. You give it the name of the function, and you do this HTML kind of thing where you close the tag immediately. Now let's look at the UI. Yeah. We're able to see that this is a navbar. From navbar.js, imported to app.js, then rendered over here, has started to appear. Now that's great. Okay. Cool. Now that we have navbar, let's go ahead and learn a couple important things we need to move forward in this application. So one of them is called hooks, React hooks. So React hooks are functionalities of React that helps us making the application, you know, uh, it's basically what makes your app reactive or have built features with it. So one of them hook is will use state hook. So to use that, you'll have to import it like this. Import from React. And the hook name is use state. So do not get confused or feel it mm, something very strange when I say hook. Hooks are nothing but just some features of React that lets us do such stuff. So the way use state works is uh, disable this solutions thing. Give me a second. Yeah, fine. I'll just go ahead. So the way it works is this is the not general syntax of use state. Okay. When you call use state returns an array. Okay. And use state also takes in one argument, which is going to be the initial state. So what use state does is it will create a state variable. A state variable is something that is binded to this component, okay, that belongs to this component, this app component, and based on which, if the value changes, the app will also kind of update, the UI will update. So that is the ultimate use case of use state. Whenever something happens, do something. Generally, that is performing a logic or performing some instructions or updating the UI. So those are the two major use cases of having a state variable. Now, coming back to what it returns. So I have put this brackets here, right? And it returns two elements. And with this notation, we can name them anything. So I'm going to name the first one count and the second one as, well, I'm going to name it time and set time. Okay. So the first thing it returns the time, it's the actual state variable. Okay. So this is the variable based on which based on which the UI will update. The second thing it returns is a function. So this is a setter function. A setter function is just a function that accepts anything and sets the value of type. Now we cannot directly do time equals to 1, 2, 3. That will not make the React make any changes or update the UI. So we have to call set time. That's how React state variables work, and that's how React will update the UI. So to show you a quick demo, let me first talk about JSX. Okay. So what you see here, the HTML kind of thing, which is not really HTML, but it's called JSX. So you can say that JSX is like HTML because you can actually use HTML in it. But the advantage is that you can use your own custom components inside JSX like this, and you can also have JavaScript directly embedded in it. So I'll show you how. So you can go and open these places, and now now I can actually write JavaScript here that will appear in the UI. So I'm just going to say math dot random. So what this does is it's generating a random number and converting it to string. Now, you can see that we have a random number generated here. And now that's kind of cool because it's coming directly because it looks like it's coming directly from the UI, uh, from the from the JavaScript that's written directly in the UI. So if you were to do it in a normal JavaScript way, you would do something like you first create a variable that has this random value, and then you will go ahead and do like document get element text dot inner text equals to this value. So we do not have to do all of that here. So React simplifies a lot of things for developers. Now if I refresh it, I will get a different random number every time. Okay. Now, okay, guys. So what now I want to do is I want an input here in the UI through which I can change the UI itself. Right? So right now I'm refreshing it. Instead of that, I want a random number on click of a button. So that's what I want here. So I'm going to change this to random number and set random number. And what do we need to click on? So we will obviously need a button. Call it button. Call it generate new random number. Yeah. Okay. We have this. You see that nothing happens when I click it because we have to attach some function to this button so that it executes on the click of it. So we'll go ahead and say on click on the button element, right? And we can pass it a function for on click. So let's define the function over here. Call it const on click handler. So what this function will do is it will create a new random number, new random equals to math dot random. Okay, and then it's gonna call set random number to set this random number variable to a newly generated random number. So we'll say set random number, new random. I'm going to pass this onClick handler function to the onClick button of this, which now means that as soon as we click the button, this generate new random button, this function will get called. So yeah, now let's also display the random number just above the button. Okay. Let's click on generate new random number, and you can see that as soon as we click, we are seeing a random number every time. So this is how easy it is to build reactive UI with React. And it's also kind of clean, right? Then if you compare it to normal HTML, CSS. Okay, now that is how use state works. You can see that as soon as this random number is changed, the UI also changes. Now this will not happen to any normal integers. If I say like let I equals to 0 and I render it instead of random number, and on click I I assign I the new random value. Okay. So this will not do it, right? Even though this function is getting called and it is assigning I the new random value, the React will not update the UI because I is not state variable. So this is how we create state variable. So that is why we need state variable so that we have applications that react easily to build reactive UI. Okay. So the next thing we should discuss is use effect hook. So this is one hook of React. The another one is use effect, which can also be imported in a similar fashion, such as use state is imported. Okay, you'll say use effect, and use effect just so takes in two arguments. The first one is the function, and the second one is something called dependency as array. Let's look at what they are as well. Okay, so I'm gonna call use effect. And like I said, the first one is a function. So I'm gonna say, let's just give onClick handler for now. And the dependency array is random number. So instead of onClick handler, let's create a separate function for use effect. Gonna call it on random number change. And I'm just going to console log number changed. And assign it to this one. What this means is use effect takes in two arguments again. First is the function, and second is an array of dependencies. Now, based on the behavior of dependencies, so if any of the dependencies passed change, this function will get called. So use effect lets us do perform any interactions or API requests or anything uh, with the help while listening to changes. Okay, so let's see if this works. So what this should happen basically here is whenever the random number changes, we should be able to see a log in the console that this number is changed. Let's- Just let's verify it. So every time you do console.log, right, it will appear in here in the in the browser's development tools. I'm going to clear the logs and let's create a generate new random. So you can see that number changed uh, got logged. So that's how use effect works. So use effect is helpful not only in this case, because in this case we do not actually need something like this. You can directly do whatever you want to do on random number change in the function in this on-click handler itself. So we need this in order to listen to changes that are not controlled directly in the UI. So there could be things, there could be third-party libraries we're using that are exposing such variables, right? And we want to listen to them and then do something. So that's why we need use effect. And also for sometimes we would want to set timeouts, something that we want to keep happening every second or something. Those stuff as well, we can do it with the help of use effect. Okay, so you can see as many number of times. So click on generate new random number changed keeps getting called. Okay, cool. So there's one more thing I want to show is use effect with zero dependencies. So if you do not have any dependencies, what happens then? So instead of giving on number change, I will immediately assign an arrow function to this, which will console log uh, use effect called. Okay, and now I want to refresh the page. So let me change this one. This one. We don't need this. Okay. Use effect is called every time there is this component renders. Okay, so for some reason this is getting rendered twice, this element, and that is why we see use effect called logged two times. If I refresh it again, I can see that it's being called twice. Because basically it's the component is being rendered twice, and that is why it is happening. So that's what the empty use effect means. It will only render once as soon as the this component is rendered. Okay, cool. I think we have covered necessary uh, basics. Let's just cover one more thing, which is how to handle inputs, because that's also something we will need to build the UI, and then we can start building the UI from mostly after this or from tomorrow. So I'm gonna put in an input field here. We do not need the random number anymore for the input. So this is how you can have input in your UI. All of this looks a bit ugly right now, so I'm just gonna add a little styling here. So this is one of the ways you can add style in React. So In HTML, you would have something like input style like this, and you would then say color red or something like this, right? So that's not how it will work in JSX, or basically HTML writing being written in React. So in order to apply styles, you would have something like this, right? You say style equals to, and you have two braces here. Hmm. So one braces means that I'm executing or I'm having JavaScript here, and the second bracket, second braces is telling that this is a JavaScript object. So anything you want to pass it as a style to an element, you have to pass it as an object here. So I'm just gonna add some padding of 2 RAM. That is quite enough. We do not need this navbar right now, so I'm gonna remove it. Okay, so I'm gonna add the same some style to the button as well. Similarly, so we'll only need margin top for this. Okay, good. We have the input. I'm gonna give it a name equals to something like email maybe, and we'll get a placeholder into email. Okay, looking good. Okay. Now, the way to handle inputs in a React way is to maintain or control the component with the values. So you can either let the native JavaScript browser to control the inputs values, or you can also control it on your own. What I mean by that is setting the value of the input in your state and also passing that state back to input. So this way you are actually controlling the input. So to keep like to keep the value of this input, I'm going to create another state variable. So which will be const email and set email. Give it initial value as empty strings. Okay. So then I'll do is I'll attach an on change listener to our input. So what this will do is it will to listen to the changes on the input, such as when user types something in it, and do something when that happens. So this here means E is something that gets passed in to your function. This function that we're passing in, so that's being exposed to E. So E is the event uh, details. So everything that happened on particular that event or on change, all of that will be available through this E. So to show you all of the information, I'm just gonna say console.log E. So just try to type something D. You can see these objects getting logged here, and it has a lot of information. Where is it coming? So you can see the target. That's where you will see the target. The target would be the input variable here. Sorry, input element. That's where it happened. And if you look at the value here inside target, it says what we actually typed here. So that is what we need to maintain in our state variable. So you can see that it's inside event, target, and value. So what we'll do is we'll say will event dot target dot value dot value. So what we're doing again is when there's a change happens to the input field, we are storing that in our React in our variable email through calling this function set email. We also want to display it by passing in value email like this. So this way, uh, whatever value that we're storing in a React state here is getting passed back to the input element like this. So one use case why you would want to do is like if you wanted to perform something on this email, such as let's say you want whatever the user types to look uppercase to them. So you can do two uppercase on that string. It will start look like this. Even though I'm typing, in small letters, uh, it will start appearing as uppercase. So this is one thing you can think of that you can do if you maintain the state. So another reason you would want to maintain the state yourself is to use the values easily. You do not want to do document dot uh, get element by name and then get the value of it. That is not like React way. If you're developing React applications, you should try to follow the React conventions as well. Of course, you could also do that, but this is how it's generally done and this is suggested. Okay. So let's log the email on the click of the button. So I will say console.log mail. So I go back to console, clear this. Okay. So now you can see that it's logging the whatever the value that's inside the input. So the purpose I did this is to show that how easy it is to access the variables that are being controlled with the input. So with that, I think we have covered all of the necessary basic React that is required to continue building the NFT minting engine. So tomorrow we will be completing the NFT engine UI. So the UI looks pretty. The UI is pretty simple. Let me show you how it looks. So this is what we will be building tomorrow. Uh, Basically, you will be able to add a picture, give it a title and description, and then you'll be able to mint it. And once you mint it, you'll be able to see all of the NFTs that you have minted in another page. Okay. So let's take questions now. If you guys have anything or any doubts, let's address them now. Here, create production level decentralized or just React is enough. So you should only you should consider Next.js when you want to use Next.js's features, right? Next.js is nothing but a framework built on top of React. So if React is not enough for you, or if you do not want to do all of the stuff like server-side rendering, or if you want to take advantage of Next.js, then you want to use Next.js, or else React is completely fine for a production level app. So uh, So TypeScript is nothing but JavaScript itself. So it's like a JavaScript, but it's like it gives you types, right? It makes the language type safe. Cannot say it's better because it's essentially the same, but you should use it to have the type safety thing. So that way, all of your variables, all of your functions have types, right? What type of variable it receives, what is the type it is going to return. All of this can be uh, and should be configured uh, while creating them in TypeScript. So, okay. Do you guys have any more questions? We do have 5 more minutes. I'm probably not the best person to reply to that question. The question is, will blockchain be the future? There is a big hype about it, but some says it's nothing great. It's definitely not something you can say it's nothing great. Blockchain is an interesting tech, right? It's got a lot of innovation happening around. One of the interesting things that's happening in blockchain would be DeFi, right? It's really crazy the stuff that's happening around there, and uh, it will definitely be a big part of the future. But again, blockchain, yeah. What is virtual DOM? So virtual DOM is a state of DOM that is maintained by React inside its memory. So it maintains it because it do not want to update React. It do not want to update the actual DOM that people see directly. So it keeps two states, and if there are any changes in virtual DOM, it then makes those. It then compares it to actual DOM, and if there is any changes, it makes changes to the actual live actual DOM that there is. Uh, yeah, if I remember correctly from what Pavan said, you would definitely require a programming language than just knowing blockchain or writing contracts to essentially create and run tests. And it would also help you understand, uh, so any application would be built on top of a backend, right? And so if you understand Node.js, you could probably also understand the backend of the blockchain application you're trying to build. It's not exactly required, but I think it's a good thing to have. Uh, is GraphQL used mostly in creating dApps? Oh, GraphQL is used everywhere, so it has nothing, I guess, to do with, it has nothing to do with dApps particularly. So it is just another choice your dApp can make to use. Yes, but will banks and transform to DeFi nowadays? But I'm not against blockchain, just curious. No, I do not think banks and all will transform to DeFi. Uh, so traditional banks are just too much of an infrastructure to shift to DeFi, and that way DeFi works and the banks all works are quite different, right? Uh, yeah, I do think. I mean, I'm again not the best person to answer this. What exactly is minting? So minting is like, I think it's basically just creating blocks on a blockchain where you can have your data or some information in the block. Minting is just making more blocks on a blockchain. Is that right? Yeah, we are definitely gonna maintain this workshop. Yeah. I'm gonna stop the recording now.